In the last 12 months, I've saved over £18,300 by living in the back of this van. And in this video, I'm going to break it down and explain how I did it. So before I get into the nuts and bolts and break down all the expenses and costs and how I arrived at that figure of 18,300, probably makes sense to set the scene and explain why I moved into the van in the first place. After traveling for 3.5 years, I got back to the UK and picked up some projects with a few different clients working around the country. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to get a vehicle, I may as well get something that I've got the ability to sleep in the back in. And I wasn't necessarily thinking about staying in it full time. It was more giving me the ability to go away at weekends and potentially when I was working away at different sites and different projects, I could kit it out and sleep in the back to save myself the hotel expenses. So when I bought the van initially, I got a diesel heater fitted, a leisure battery fitted, and got all the basics in there. And at the time I was living with a friend and we had a bit of a fallout to the point where it left me in a position where I needed to find somewhere else to live. And so whilst in the back of my mind, I was thinking it was maybe several months away, maybe in the summer that I would try and give the van a go in terms of moving into it, this fallout kind of sped that process up. And over the space of a few weeks, I got a few key jobs done on the van. So I remember getting the windows tinted, a flat, flexible solar panel on the roof, as well as doing a bit of a quick job on insulation and carpet lining. And soon enough, the time come round and that was it. I was living in the van. And what I would say is my philosophy with this van was to always try and make it stealthy. So it doesn't have windows in the back. The solar on the roof is like a flexible panel that's really tight to the roof, so you can't even tell it's on there. And with things like the tinted windows in the front, I can get from the front into the back and no one can really see very well through the windows. So it's all very stealthy. And I just have a feel like the van doesn't really attract much attention. So it's probably important to mention that I didn't move in as an absolute necessity. It was primarily to save money. And I just enjoy keeping my costs down, and it gives me the ability to do certain things like go traveling when I want to. So I understand that for many people it's a necessity, and since being on the road and staying in different places, there's more people living in vans or cars than you'd actually realize. So I consider myself fortunate that I was able to do this through choice rather than necessity. So when I first started living in the van, I was stealth parking on the street and finding different places around town and moving around every night. And I soon discovered that this Horizon parking app, you can go wherever you're going around the country, you just, plug in where you are and it will come up with various different places that you can park. And on average, it costs anything between sort of £2.50 and £5 a night. And so that saved me hassle of having to find somewhere to park whenever I would go to different places. And it was just so easy. And so essentially, because I've got a stealthy vehicle, I'm going into, say, Sainsbury's, for example, and no one's paying any sort of attention. It just took away the hassle of having to think about where to park. And when I did take the leap from living in a house to moving into the van, I'm not going to lie, it was quite nerve-wracking. In the first few nights, you're kind of constantly on hyper alert and looking out the window and there's all these things going through your mind, but that soon dissipates and you realize very quickly that no one cares really. No one cares. No one's looking. When you start to realize that, everything gets a little bit easier. And before I moved into the van, I was living in a house and I remember thinking, like, what do I need when I'm in the house? What's the essentials? And I remember thinking an air fryer. I want the ability to be able to cook something. So I got an air fryer in here, a coffee machine. I'm a bit addicted to coffee. So that was an essential. So I've got that. And then outside of that, you're looking at the toilet and the shower situation. And so for me, I have got like a premium gym membership where they've got gyms dotted about all over the country. And so I go to the gym every day. So I'll go to the gym, get your shower, then takes that issue away. Having a smaller vehicle, one of the sacrifices are that having a sink and all that kind of thing isn't really a viable option. But on the flip side, there are plenty of benefits to living in the smaller vehicle. It's almost like driving a car around. And then also on top of that, I've already spoken about the stealth factor. And with having the air fryer and the fridge in here, you're not spending money eating out all the time, which could be a tendency if you're living in a van and you haven't got certain bits of equipment. You'll end up eating out more, and that can then offset the fact that you're saving money by living in a vehicle. So if we jump into the numbers, I've just got them written down on my phone and like a cost comparison. And so the biggest one is obviously rent that's going to be saved. So I was looking at a very modest 1-bedroom or studio apartment, and that would have been about £650 a month. And then on top of that, you've got electricity at about 120, council tax at 100, water. And so you offset that. The only equivalent expense I've got in the van is the parking, using that Horizon parking app, which is £54 a month on average. So obviously that's the main differentiating factor between the two. On top of that, by getting the van, I no longer needed to catch the train. And so trains and Ubers were costing me £680 a month. Whereas the van, when I look at fuel and depreciation, when you combine the two, it's only £340 a month. Another big reason for me getting the van was hotels. So when I averaged it out, I was staying in hotels 2 times per week at different places in the country, different cities. And that was a massive reason. I just really begrudged paying that. And as I was saying before, sometimes if you had events on in the city, in Bristol, Leeds, Manchester, the hotels were like 120, 140 just for basic hotels. So I no longer have to pay hotels at 2 times per week. So that's £480 saved. That's £2,060 per month that I no longer needed to spend out. Now, obviously, the van does have some expenses that living in the house wouldn't have done. So the rent in the parking is £54. I've already spoken about fuel and depreciation. So insurance and service charge, I've allowed £80 a month for insurance and £30 a month for the service charge. The only other cost to factor in is the cost of the leisure battery and the solar setup over its lifetime. So assuming it lasts about 10 years, it's only really £25 a month. The cost of that is £529 a month. And when you deduct the £529 from the £2,060, then that's £1,531 a month I've saved. And then when you factor that by 12, that's a total of £18,372 saved. And essentially that's money that's just gone straight into my savings account. So to me, it's not for everybody, but to me it was a no-brainer, and it's been quite easy. I would say the biggest challenge is when it gets cold and the winter months, because the solar's not really working properly. So in the summer, the air fryer, I can use it as much as I want 3 times a day without a problem, assuming it's sunny, of course, or there's at least some sun. But as you get into the winter months, you have to manage things a bit more. In the van in the winter, I do have a diesel heater, but it just is not very comfortable to sleep in with the diesel heater on all the time. It's kind of makes the air very dry. So obviously you do have to wrap up. So my advice would be, if someone wants to give this a try, certainly start it in the summer. So when I'm reflecting on would I recommend this to other people, I would absolutely recommend it, 100%. My advice would be that get a stealthy vehicle and get a smaller vehicle. That being said, something like this is only suitable for one person. So if there's more than one person, then you definitely want to get a bigger vehicle. And I think living in a minivan like this, very closely aligns with minimalism and just living with what you need and nothing more. There's no point in having loads and loads of clothes, loads and loads of material possessions, because otherwise you'll just end up paying for storage or having to store it on the roof, and then the vehicle becomes less fuel efficient. So over time, I've slowly but surely chipped away at just having the bare essentials to the point where I don't need any storage it probably took about 3 months for me to slowly sell certain things, give away certain things, and work out what I do and what I don't need. So my advice to anybody moving into a van is to kind of think a little bit further ahead and understand that you don't need as much as you think you do. And it's definitely liberating, just having what you need and no more than that. I feel like when in the past, when I've lived in a house, I remember having a garage just full of all sorts of stuff, surfboards, kayaks, tools, equipment, this and that. And it's just something that weighs you down and stops you being free. And so this lifestyle is the opposite of that. I understand that there's plenty of people that are interested and considering living this life. And so I would say, if you've got any questions about it, let me know in the comments and I'll be more than happy to answer it. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.